Ahoy, Rovers! Well, in this episode, I bring you big news and big changes concerning the cockpit area. My name's Alan Mulholland, and this is the story of how I built the Wave Rover 650. 3 years ago, I refitted a 40-year-old Contessa 26 and took her on an amazing 7,800 nautical mile ocean voyage. We crossed the Atlantic twice, but a knockdown on the second crossing and COVID-19 put an end to my solo circumnavigation. So now, I'm building a new boat, smaller, lighter, but more suited for a solo circumnavigation. The Wave Rover 650. All right, so let's unpack this big news. So let me just rewind a bit. So on the voyages of Wave Rover, I found I spent very little time in the cockpit, and this isn't really uncommon for small boat ocean sailors. It's not the most comfortable place with the movement of the boat, and it's generally a very wet place, and it really was in the case of the Contessa, which has a very, very low freeboard to start with. So I found the most comfortable place for me on Wave Rover was actually in the stern pulpit. I put a bench across the rails and I would sit there, and it gave me great visibility and also took me out of the spray zone. It was quite a comfortable place to sit, and so I knew I would be doing the same on this. And then I decided, well, all that extra structure that goes into creating the cockpit, and by that I mean really the cockpit well, the footwell. There's a lot of structure goes in there. You have to make sure it can shed water quickly, and also it's a weak point in the construction. So I'm doing away with that footwell. So the stern of this Wave Rover will just be a decked over space with a nice, good camber, about 2.5 inches over 8 feet, that'll shed water quickly. Now that will give me the advantage of putting a Wave Rover hatch in that space, and which will make getting in and out of the boat so much easier. I really love that hatch on Wave Rover. I thought that was one of the great innovations along with the doghouse. Now this hatch will be positioned in such a way that when it's open, I can just rotate my body slightly and I'll be able to grab the tiller and steer from inside the boat if need be. Another reason that I'm going with this, I'm a big fan of Lynn and Larry Pardey and their sailing adventures. And when they upgraded from their original Seraphim to Talisman, well, they took the cockpit out as well because they found the same thing I'm talking about. So they would just set cushions down on that decked over area and sit on those when they wanted to steer on the tiller. But bear this in mind. About 99.9% of the steering that was done in Wave Rover was done by the Mark III. So I don't anticipate very much steering. And when I did steer on Wave Rover, I generally would either sit on that bench that I told you about on the stern pulpit, or I would be standing and leaning against it and using my feet on the tiller to steer. Very comfortable way of doing it, great visibility. Anyway, first step is I have to rebuild the transom a little bit to get that camber. A lot to do, time to crack on. Okay, so these are the two cambers I've settled on. The big one right here, this is for the cabin, and it's a camber of 5¼ inches over 8 feet. And the smaller one here is the camber for the deck, and it's 2.5 inches over 8 feet. Let me see if I can get a better view. So there we go. So here I have a beautiful piece of pine, clear pine, relatively clear pine. Let's see, we're almost 15 inches wide. And I need a 4-inch piece, and that'll be to build up the transom for the new cockpit arrangement. So I'll just rip that out. What I've done is I've established just a straight line along here because this edge is just a wild edge, so I have to pick something. So I've arbitrarily just put a straight line that's running fairly parallel with the two sides so I can maximize my space. Just one of the other things you want to look at is if there is any defects in the wood, you know, I'm trying to work those out. So I'm cutting right along where this sort of sap pocket is because I don't want that in the middle of any beam that I'll have at a later time. There's still plenty of usable wood to get my stringers and deck stringers out of. All right, time to crack on with the ripping of this, just using a skill saw for that. So what we're looking at here is that pine stringer you saw me working and put the round over on. I have it secured by 3 screws to the transom. And what's it doing here? Well, this is the template that you saw me make for the deck camber. And once this is laminated onto the transom, I'll be trimming back this stringer to this camber that you're looking at right here. Now on the back side of this stringer, I've had to put a couple of pieces of plywood to bring it out to the transom, and I'll show you that right away. So here I'm just looking at the little buildup I've done of plywood to bring the stringer, so the pine stringer right here, to bring the thickness of it out to the transom. And I just used some scrap because that's all I needed. It only needed to be about 2 inches tall, but the almost 7 feet of width of the transom. So now it's time to do the big glue up. Well, there it is. The transom stringer is now on. We'll just let that set up for 24 hours at the very least, because we still have very cool temperatures here, minus 18 Celsius today. So after it's hardened, then I'll draw the camber on and then cut it down to the camber, and then we can proceed. I'll just show you the far side. Well, there's really not a whole lot to see here. I've used tape, some packing tape over top of the joint, just so that my clamps won't stick to the glue. But it's a veritable forest of clamps. Well, that night, after leaving the boat shed, we got a dump of snow, and the roads were closed for over 24 hours. This is me getting back to the boat shed a day later, and I'm in behind a snowplow because it's the safest place to be. Well, it's the next day, and I've had 2 heaters going overnight on account of the cold temperatures. It's actually warmed up now. It's only -8 today. And the heaters are just inside here. And we're just going to take a quick look at this and see if the glue set up. I'm 99% sure it has. So here's, oh yeah. Yeah, it's quite hard. Okay, so we can take the clamps off now and proceed to shape this. Well, Rovers, I'm pretty happy with the way the glue is set up. I've tested it with my thumbnail, and it's hard enough that I'm not leaving an indent, so I know I can work it. So I've got my template here that I've already cut. Now I have a couple of templates. I have one for the deck camber and one for the cabin camber. So this is the deck camber, and I'm just going to transfer the line onto this now. So I just need to line my center up with the center of the boat. Okay, so I have a nice pencil line now that's following what will be the deck. It's a little uneven, but that's fine because we're going to just cut a little bit above this line, and then we're going to take a belt sander and we will make that radius fair. Easy peasy. All right, time to crack on with that. So I've just finished cutting this camber on the stringer, and like I said, it's rough. I didn't try to be overly precise because I know I'll be fairing that with a belt sander. But the one thing you do want to check right off the bat is that your glue joints, and that's between the pine and the ply, you want to make sure they are continuous. You don't want any gaps, and ours are totally fine. Those are excellent. So there's no gaps. That means water won't get trapped, which means rot won't happen. Anyway, this is as far as I'm going to take this one. I will sand this when I have a couple other stringers ready to sand because it'll create a lot of dust. Well, it's an honor to add a new name to our benefactors bulkhead. Todd Smith. So what is a benefactor? Well, these folks have made a contribution of $100 US or more to the project, and their names will be affixed to a bulkhead inside Wave Rover and will be traveling with me on our circumnavigation. Now, these donations truly are much appreciated. Well, like I said at the beginning of the video, this is a big change, taking the footwell out of this area and making this whole, what would be the cockpit area, totally decked over. Well, that's, you know, some people are going to think it's radical, but it makes perfect sense to me because my hatch is more or less where the camera is right now, and I'll be able to just reach out and steer from the hatch. And I'll also be able to operate the sheets from the hatch and have great visibility from the hatch. It makes sense to me. Of course, there will be a stern pulpit behind me here that'll be above the deck, and on the mid rail, I will have a bench going across, and that's the seating area. That's the area that I found that I enjoy to be when at sea on a small boat anyway, because the visibility is marvelous and you're out of the spray zone. Now, the camber I chose for the deck is a little bit more, actually it's significantly more than what the plans had described. And part of that reasoning is I like the look for sure, but also whenever you put a strong camber in, and I'll be putting an even stronger camber on the cabin top, but whenever you put a strong camber in, you are pre-stressing the plywood. And when you do that, the plywood is substantially stronger. A flat piece of plywood will deflect with, you know, X amount of force, but when you pre-stress it, it will take, you know, 2x or a significant amount more force to deflect the plywood. So it's a stronger solution as well. And you know, as I said at the beginning, the parties, they chose to go this route as well, and I have a lot of respect for them and the sailing they did. You know, they're true small boat voyagers. Well, Rovers, again, thanks for watching. Well, Mr. Speckles and I would like to take a moment to thank all the Wave Rover patrons whose pledges of support help power the Wave Rover project. Now, if you'd like to know more about Wave Rover's patron page and Benefactors Bulkhead, I have links to both those pages in the video description. Now, another way to help Wave Rover, and it doesn't cost you a dime, is by sharing our content on your social media. So now, as always, Rovers, thanks for watching. Give us one more. Brilliant.